Now we will see how to change this text component to actually an object. You get me, like a 3D object, like a cube or a box, one might call it. Now, where will we know about this box and the parameters or the props that it might require? The docs, obviously. The props are in the docs. The properties are in the documents for React Viro, and there we will find this Viro box. Now inside this you can see it is a simple 3D box that is defined by width, height and length per se. Like if you provide this component with these three props, it will render a prop, a box, a 3D object inside of your AR scene. So we simply copy this code and we go over here. Now as you can see, our application is already running and it is too big for us, and we saw these problems. So we comment this out and we paste this code inside of here. Now it says that Viro box not found. So why Viro box not found? Because we have not just simply imported it inside of our application. We need to import this component from the React Viro library, and now this component should be rendered on the screen. But as you can see, there is no component on the screen. So why is there no component on the screen? Because position is not declared. These are the parameters, these are the basic parameters for the cube to exist. Then to see it in your perspective, according to your scale, according to your position, you need to define those parameters in the form of parameter definitions that I have told you about till now. Now position is that, and then we provide a scale parameter also to this cube so that it doesn't appear as too large or too little on the screen, because this is a parameter that helps us to define the scale of that cube that will appear in your augmented reality application. Doesn't that look like a Tesseract cube? So this is how you render cubes inside of your applications. Now this is not looking very realistic. Now we need to make it look a little bit more realistic. For that we will just apply a simple texture to this cube. Basically we'll wrap around a texture of a wooden texture, a steel texture, a glass texture, whatever kind of textures that you can find, or you can like, or you can even create your own textures. Now we are going to see how we can load 3D textures on this 3D object that we have loaded in our augmented reality application that we are creating using the Viro React library. Till now we have done a lot. We have rendered this on screen using some properties and some components that are present inside of this Viro React library by default. For rendering a 3D object, for rendering a 3D texture, we need to know about certain more components basically. So this is one of the components, Viro material. It's basically used for appearance of geometry services when rendered. Each object in a scene can be assigned one or more materials. So we will have to define a material inside of our application. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. We are supposed to import this. Then we are supposed to create a component out of this. Simply a function that will take an object. Now the object will take a key value pair. The key will be the name of the texture that you're trying to create. In my case, let's say my texture, and the value will again be an object. So this is a nesting of objects inside of JavaScript which we are providing to a function. So you understand this is already an intermediate level course, but obviously you don't need to go in that deep. Over here we will just provide a diffuse texture property that we'll use to diffuse the image or the color or the pattern that we are trying to put over this 3D object. In our case it will be, let's say, whatever.jpg. Now why this assets folder? Because to organize all the folders and files that are associated with textures in one place, this is how you structure your code base, your source code. So there's this asset folder. As you can see, there are already some images that I have downloaded using Google Images. So these are the Tesseract images that we are going to put on this. This is just a Google search away, my friends. As you can see, glowing blue backgrounds. You can search for glowing blue backgrounds. I need a proper background, not the photo of an actual cube, because we cannot put that over the cube. It will look a little bit odd because each photo is been rendered on every face of the cube. Basically on every face of the cube this will be rendered. So we'll just see how through code. And we have defined this. We have created a Viro materials. So if we hit save, it is saying whatever.jpg not found, because obviously we don't have a whatever.jpg. So we have a wood.jpg file for now. So we'll give it that, but you can see the texture was not rendered over it. Why? Because we have not provided it as a property over here. We need to provide it as a property over here. Now the way to provide it as a property is in a form of array of strings. So my texture, so T is capital, I'm sorry, my texture. Now you can see that the wood texture has been rendered over the 3D object. Same way you can define other textures also over here. Let's say Tesseract, again diffuse texture, and we'll require an image to diffuse over this 3D objects that is present inside our assets directory. Now mind you, the name should be same. If it's JPEG over here, then it should be JPEG over here. If it's JPG over here, it should be JPG over here. If I change this, then again it will start yelling at me that there's an error. So the name should be same. Now you can see we have multiple textures. You can add more textures if you want. Obviously rendering all of those textures to different faces or in a combination of them will require some higher level programming skills, but we are not going to see that for this demo. We are going to see that in the upcoming demos. Some more textures if you want. Now what you can do is switch between the textures available inside of your program. It's that simple, my friends. So if I just put Tesseract, you can see it looks like, doesn't look like a Tesseract because it's not glowing, but you get the idea that how easy it is to make it look like a real Tesseract glowing in front of you. The user experience that will provide and everything, it should be fine. Finally, we'll see how to apply animation to this 3D object that we have rendered on the screen. After realizing how to apply animations, you will really see the power of augmented reality, and really your applications will come out of the screen and try to impress the user in the best possible manner. Now to apply animations on this object, we need to know about one more component that is named as Viro animations. Basically, it's so intuitive. The naming is so intuitive. Viro animations. For Viro textures, there were Viro materials. You could apply a material on 3D objects. Now, just as in the case of materials, when we created a material using the Viro material component that we imported on the screen and applied this glowing blue background texture on the screen in the previous lecture. Now over here we'll try to import this Viro animations component, my friends. Now this Viro animations component, unlike the materials component, it is not created, it is registered, then it is applied, then it is looped over, then it can be chained with other animations. So this is how the naming convention inside of this Viro React library is basically put together. It's not always about creating something. An animation can be registered also. The naming inside any kind of React library is very intuitive. Once you get a hold of the naming, then you will understand the similarities and pattern inside of that documentation. Then it will be very easier for you to understand and comprehend the documentation that you're trying to read. Now, just as I showed you, we have imported the Viro animations library. Now, instead of creating an animation, what we'll try to do is we'll try to register the animation. As you can see, that register animation is automatically being showed to you. Now we'll go for this function. Now this is simply a function which will take in an object just as the create materials object. Now this object is the animation that we are trying to create, just like above the texture that we were trying to create using an image. Now firstly we will name the animation, naming the animation, and then providing its properties. Now the animation will have certain kind of properties, obviously. For that, again, we'll go to the documentation, what kind of properties the animation can have. So we can change the opacity, we can change the position, we can rotate it, we can scale it, we can change the material over time. So all of this can be changed in a transient manner over time. Imagine if you are changing material, rotation, scale, opacity, and position of something on screen in virtual reality while your camera is rendering it in real processing power. Now, to further understand this documentation and apply it in our project, we'll have to go through a documentation a little bit. So as you can see, we have to set this prop, and I'm trying to find a rotate instance. So as you can see over here, there is a duration and there is this rotate along the Z axis. So when I say rotate, I mean that this cube has to rotate, okay, in situ at its position. So if it has to rotate at its position, this is the vertical y-axis where I want it to rotate at. So you can see the axis superposition, right? I want it to rotate on the y-axis. So I can have it rotate on the x-axis, and I can have it rotate on the z-axis. If you can imagine the z-axis, it will be, you'll be looking at like this. So understanding this graph and understanding the properties that I can use to animate this, we'll go ahead and we'll provide properties to this animation. Now we can name it rotate also, because it's much more intuitive. Sorry. Properties. Now I want it to rotate on the y-axis, and just as in the documentation showed us, plus is equals to 45. I think this stands for 45-degree rotation. It can be nothing else. So I want it to rotate every 45 degrees in one animation cycle. Now how long the animation should last for? 2500 seconds. I think it should be fine. 2500 milliseconds, sorry. So it is 2.5 seconds or 2500 milliseconds. Rotate along the z-axis for now. So we can change it to y-axis so that it becomes more clear. Rotate on the y-axis plus 45. So I want it to rotate more, a little bit more, like let's say 90 degrees. So duration is 2500 seconds. So this is us registering the component. This is what was required. Now we are going to simply use this component that we have declared and registered over here inside of our Viro box as a prop. Animations. Naming is so intuitive, as you can see. Now this also is an object. Just in the documentation, just as in the documentation has showed us, we'll first provide the name, then we'll provide the run command, and then we'll provide the loop command. Do we want it to loop or not? So over here we can just use this code. The name is not loop rotate, name is just rotate. We can name it anything we want, my friends. So it's rotating at a very high speed. So in the documentation, as we can see, the duration is supposed to come out of the properties block. That is why it is rotating at a very high speed, because it's not taking into account duration property. It has to come outside of the block. Now if we render it on screen, you can see the animation has started. Look at how brilliant it is looking, my friends. What we started with, a simple white cube, and now we have a rotating, kind of like similar to Tesseract cube. Obviously we need to add the glow and other kind of properties. We need to adjust the lighting a little bit, but you are understanding the power of it. And just in the next video, I'm going to show the real power of it when I'll make an augmented reality business card application that will, you know, be a very good example of the power this kind of applications hold, the, you know, the implementation capacity and the rendering capacity of an iPhone, of a MacBook, of a normal Android phone, of normal computing devices that you have. Thank you. Keep watching for more.